every person who has ever achieved greatness has one thing in common: pain. Pain is not the enemy, it's the training ground for champions. Too often we run from discomfort, we avoid the struggle, we pray for an easy path. But the truth is, it's in those painful moments, the failures, the disappointments, the sleepless nights that your character is built. Pain stretches you, it molds you, and it prepares you for a level of greatness you can't even imagine. If you want to rise to the top, if you want to be legendary, you must learn to embrace pain, because pain is the price of greatness. You know, one of the biggest mistakes people make when they face pain is assuming that it's some sort of punishment, that the universe or life or even God has singled them out unfairly. It's easy to fall into that mindset because pain hurts. It feels unjust. It feels like you've been wronged. But if you stop and look closer, pain is not punishment, it's instruction. Pain is the clearest feedback system we have in life. It's the signal that something is happening, something that demands your attention, something that has the potential to transform you if you listen carefully. Think about it. When you touch a hot stove, the pain tells you immediately, pull your hand away or you'll get burned. That same principle applies to everything in life, not just your body. Emotional pain, psychological pain, the sting of rejection, the weight of failure. It's life's way of saying, there's something here you need to learn. The problem is, most of us don't want to hear that lesson. We want comfort, we want ease, we want smooth sailing. And when things get hard, we interpret it as unfair. But let me suggest to you that pain is the very evidence that you're alive and growing. Now, growth is impossible without stress. Just as muscles only strengthen through resistance, your character only strengthens through struggle. And resistance, by definition, is uncomfortable. That's why athletes push themselves to exhaustion in training. That's why scholars wrestle with difficult ideas that make their heads hurt. That's why entrepreneurs endure sleepless nights trying to figure out how to keep their vision alive. They all understand at some level that pain is the teacher that equips them for the next level of responsibility. It's not there to destroy them, it's there to shape them. But let's go a little deeper psychologically. Human beings are wired to seek meaning, not just pleasure. And meaning most often comes through facing suffering head on. When you interpret pain as punishment, you collapse into despair because there's no way forward. You're stuck in the why me question. But when you shift your mindset and say, what is this pain teaching me? You suddenly move from being a victim of circumstance to being an active participant in your own transformation. That's a powerful shift. One enslaves you, the other empowers you. Let me give you an example. Think of a person who's been rejected, whether in relationships, in business, or in their personal dreams. The pain of rejection is brutal. It cuts deep into your sense of self-worth. But if you stay with that pain, instead of running from it, it can teach you something profound. It might reveal areas where you need to grow stronger. It might show you where your skills, your preparation, or your resilience weren't enough. It might even teach you that your value is not determined by whether others accept you or not. That lesson, once learned, makes you unshakable. But you can't get that wisdom without first going through the sting of the rejection. Another way to think about it is this: every painful experience is like a mirror. It reflects back to you parts of yourself that you don't usually see. Sometimes it reveals weakness. Sometimes it reveals strength you didn't know you had. Sometimes it reveals your capacity for endurance or your lack of discipline. But you only see those things when life presses on you hard enough to bring them to the surface. And isn't that what growth requires? Honest self-knowledge. Without pain, you're blind to the deeper truths about who you are and what you're capable of. Philosophers have long understood this. The Stoics, for example, didn't view suffering as something to be avoided at all costs. They believed it was essential training for the soul. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Pain is not there to stop you, it's there to direct you. That's wisdom that has stood the test of centuries. And modern psychology backs it up. Resilience is built, not given. And it's built through exposure to challenge, adversity, and yes, pain. So I want you to reconsider the pain in your life. Instead of asking, why me? Ask, what is this showing me? What is this shaping in me? What is this preparing me for? If you can reframe pain as a teacher, you'll stop running from it. You'll start embracing it as a necessary companion on the path to greatness. Because the truth is, every significant achievement in human history is written in the ink of struggle. Nothing worth having comes without pain, and nothing truly meaningful is born in comfort. Here's the challenge. The next time you encounter pain, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, don't shrink away, don't curse it. Lean in, pay attention. Listen carefully. Because hidden inside that pain is the wisdom, the strength, and the character you're gonna need for the next level of your life. Pain is not a punishment. Pain is a teacher. And the sooner you learn to sit in its classroom, the sooner you'll graduate into greatness. If you look closely at the lives of people you admire, the champions, the leaders, the innovators, the ones who stood out in history, you'll notice something striking. They all carry scars. Some are visible, most are not, but they're always there. Those scars tell the story of battles fought, defeats endured, and struggles overcome. And here's the truth: there is no greatness without them. Every champion you've ever looked up to, every hero you've ever read about, had to go through pain, rejection, and failure before they became who they are. The problem is when we see these people in their moment of victory, we forget the path that led them there. We see the gold medal, but not the years of blood and sweat behind it. We see the best-selling author, but not the dozens of rejection letters that came before the book deal. We see the successful business leader, but not the bankruptcies, the sleepless nights, or the seasons of doubt. And because we don't see the scars, we assume maybe they didn't have to pay the price. That's a lie. They all paid it. Greatness demands it. Think about someone like Nelson Mandela. We admire him as a symbol of justice and resilience, but we forget he spent 27 years in prison. 27 years of his life taken from him. And yet, that scar, that deep wound of injustice became the very thing that shaped his moral authority. His suffering gave him a credibility that no speech, no education, no title could have given him. That's why when he spoke, people listened, not because he had a perfect life, but because his scars testified to the depth of his struggle. Or think of someone like Michael Jordan. Everyone remembers the championships, the game-winning shots, the icon that he became. But what do fewer people remember? That he was cut from his high school basketball team. That's a wound. For a young man who dreamed of greatness, that rejection could have destroyed him. But instead, he turned that pain into fuel. That scar became the reason he trained harder, pushed further, and never settled for mediocrity. It wasn't his talent alone that made him a champion. It was his scars. Psychologically, scars matter because they're proof that you endured something painful and came out the other side. They're evidence of survival, and survival builds confidence. Every scar says, I faced something that could have broken me, but it didn't. That kind of knowledge changes you. It changes how you see yourself. It changes how you face the next challenge. If you've been through the fire once, you're less afraid of the next flame. But let's not romanticize it too much. Scars don't feel noble when you're earning them. They hurt, they leave marks, they remind you of failures, of betrayals, of moments when you weren't enough. And that's exactly why they're powerful, because they humble you. They remind you that you're human, that you're fragile, and that life is not easy. Without scars, you risk arrogance. You risk believing that greatness is about ease and talent. But with scars, greatness is about endurance, resilience, and persistence. And here's something important: scars are also what connect us to one another. People don't bond over perfection, they bond over struggle. When you share your wounds honestly, when you admit the pain you've walked through, that's when people really relate to you. Because they see themselves in your struggle. That's why the greatest leaders are not the ones who appear flawless. They're the ones who have suffered and yet chosen to rise. Their scars make them trustworthy because they've proven they can endure hardship without giving up. Now, there's a temptation when you're in pain to want to hide it, to cover it up, to pretend it's not there. But hiding your scars robs you of their power. It denies the story they tell. Instead of hiding them, learn to honor them. Not in a way that makes you a victim, but in a way that says, this is where I've been. This is what I've survived, and this is why I can keep moving forward. So the next time you look at someone you admire, remember their greatness isn't in spite of their scars. It's because of them. And when you look at your own scars, stop seeing them as disqualifications. They are your qualifications. They are the evidence that you fought battles and kept going. Every champion has a scar. Every scar tells a story of resilience. And if you're willing to carry yours with courage, they'll become the very thing that prepares you for greatness. Growth is not possible without pain. It's one of the fundamental truths of existence that we often resist. We want to expand, we want to improve, we want to evolve into better versions of ourselves. But we want it without discomfort, without sacrifice, without that sting that tells us something is being stretched beyond its limit. Yet if you think about it honestly, every meaningful area of growth in your life has been preceded by struggle, by tension, by some form of pain. The body itself proves this point. When you go to the gym and you lift weights, what's happening physiologically is that the fibers in your muscles are literally being torn. The body responds by repairing those tears, and in the process, it makes the muscle stronger and more resilient than it was before. But that strength only comes because of the tearing. No pain, no growth. That principle is not confined to the physical realm. It applies to your mind, your character, your spirit. If you've ever learned a difficult subject, you know that it's not comfortable. Your brain almost feels like it's aching, stretching to grasp something new. That intellectual discomfort is the mental version of tearing muscle fibers. And once you push through, your capacity has expanded. Now, consider this psychologically. Growth requires confronting the parts of yourself that are weak, undeveloped, or unrefined. And that's painful because it means admitting you're not who you want to be yet. It means recognizing flaws, insecurities, fears, all the things we like to avoid. But without facing them, you stay stagnant. Pain is the pressure that forces you to confront the raw truth about yourself. And in confronting that truth, you gain the opportunity to grow. Think of the times in your life when you were forced to mature. Maybe it was the loss of a loved one. Maybe it was a job that didn't work out. Maybe it was a relationship that broke your heart. In those moments, you felt the crushing weight of pain. But afterward, once you had time to process it, you realized you weren't the same person anymore. Something in you had deepened. Your perspective had shifted. You saw life with a clarity you didn't have before. That's growth, and it was pain that produced it. There's a deeper, almost philosophical layer to this. Human beings don't just want comfort, they want meaning. And meaning is most often discovered in the furnace of suffering. The psychologist Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps of World War II, wrote about this with profound clarity. He observed that those who endured unimaginable suffering but managed to find meaning in it were the ones who survived with their humanity intact. That principle scales down into everyday life. You grow when you can take the pain you experience and embed it into a larger story of purpose. Pain becomes not just something you endured, but something that shaped you into someone capable of greater responsibility, greater compassion, greater strength. But here's the catch: pain doesn't automatically produce growth. It has to be engaged with consciously. Two people can go through the same difficulty and come out very differently. One becomes bitter, resentful, and closed off. The other becomes wiser, stronger, more compassionate. The difference is in how they interpret the pain. If you treat pain as meaningless suffering, you will shrink under its weight. If you treat it as the soil in which growth happens, you'll rise above it with new strength. And this is why comfort, though attractive, is actually dangerous if it becomes your highest aim. Comfort lulls you into mediocrity. It whispers that you don't need to push, you don't need to stretch, you don't need to face hard truths. But without pressure, without resistance, without pain, you don't grow. You stagnate. You stay the same, even when deep down you know you're capable of more. The challenge then is to shift how you relate to pain. Instead of running from it, learn to see it as a signal. Here is an opportunity to grow. Here is life presenting you with the conditions necessary to become stronger. That doesn't mean you seek suffering recklessly. It means you don't hide when suffering comes. You lean into it. You ask, what is this shaping in me? How is this preparing me for the responsibilities I want to take on? How is this experience refining me into someone more capable than I was yesterday? So when you find yourself in pain, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, remember this growth is happening. It may not be visible right away. It may not feel like progress in the moment. But if you endure, if you stay conscious and reflective, you'll discover that the pain you despise was actually the instrument of your transformation. Pain is not just something to survive, it's something to use. It is the raw material from which strength, wisdom, and greatness are forged. Don't waste it. Don't run from it. Let it do its work. Because in the end, pain doesn't just break you, it builds you. And if you allow it, that very pain will become the foundation of your growth, the proof that you are capable of far more than you ever imagined. One of the most important choices you will ever make in life is how you respond to pain. Because pain in itself is inevitable. You can't escape it. What you can control is whether that pain becomes the reason you give up or the reason you rise higher. And that decision, more than almost anything else, will determine the trajectory of your life. It's easy to use pain as an excuse. People do it all the time. I didn't grow up with opportunities. I was rejected too many times. Life hasn't been fair to me. And you know what? Those statements might be true. Life is unfair. Some people do have to carry heavier burdens than others. Some people are betrayed, abandoned, or overlooked in ways that cut deeply. But here's the harsh reality: if you stop there, if you allow pain to justify mediocrity, then you've lost. Pain will have beaten you, not because it existed, but because you gave it the power to define your limits. There's another option though. You can take that same pain and decide, this will not stop me. In fact, this will be the very fuel that drives me forward. That's the mindset of every person who has ever transcended their circumstances. They didn't deny their pain. They didn't pretend it didn't hurt. They simply refused to let it be the final word. Instead, they transformed it into energy, into fire, into determination. Think of someone who's been humiliated, laughed at, told they'll never succeed. That pain cuts deep. But instead of letting those words crush them, they can let those very words ignite a fire inside you. I'll prove you wrong. I'll become so good they can't ignore me. That's not delusion, that's fuel. That's taking the negativity directed at you and recycling it into motivation. It's like turning poison into medicine. Psychologically, this process is called reframing. You don't change the fact that something painful happened, but you reinterpret its meaning. Instead of seeing pain as proof that you're powerless, you decide to see it as evidence that you're being challenged to grow stronger. And that small shift changes everything. Pain stops being a weight holding you down and becomes a force propelling you forward. History is full of examples of this. Many of the greatest leaders, thinkers, and creators came from painful circumstances. Abraham Lincoln faced repeated failures, devastating losses, and crippling depression, yet he used those struggles to cultivate empathy and resilience that defined his presidency. Oprah Winfrey endured poverty and trauma in her early life, but instead of using that as an excuse to withdraw from the world, she turned it into the very foundation of her drive and her capacity to connect with millions. They didn't succeed despite their pain. They succeeded because they used it. And this isn't just about grand figures in history. Look at your own life. There are people who've been through heartbreak and decided they'll never trust again, shutting themselves off from love. That's using pain as an excuse. Then there are people who've been through the same heartbreak and decide, this will teach me to love more wisely, to value deeper connections, to never settle for less than I deserve. That's using pain as fuel. The event is the same, the interpretation makes all the difference. But here's the challenge. It's easier to lean on excuses than it is to turn pain into fuel. Excuses absolve you of responsibility. They let you stay where you are, comfortable in your suffering without demanding more of yourself. Fuel, on the other hand, demands that you work. It demands that you transform hurt into energy, bitterness into determination, wounds into wisdom. That process isn't automatic. It requires discipline, reflection, and choice. So the real question is this: what story are you telling yourself about your pain? Are you telling yourself that it's the reason you'll never make it? the reason you'll never rise above mediocrity? Or are you telling yourself that this is exactly the fire you need to push harder, to stay disciplined, to keep moving when everything in you wants to stop? That narrative matters more than the pain itself. Let me put it simply, pain will either be the excuse that limits you or the fuel that launches you. And no one else gets to decide which one it becomes. That choice belongs to you. So the next time pain comes, and it will, pause before you complain, before you retreat, before you surrender. Ask yourself, how can I use this? How can I turn this thing into strength, this setback into drive, this rejection into determination? Because when you learn to do that, nothing in life can truly defeat you. Don't waste your pain by letting it paralyze you. Use it, channel it. Turn it into the very fuel that powers your journey forward. Pain is not the reason you can't succeed. Pain is the reason you must. One of the biggest mistakes we make is treating pain as if it's eternal. When we're in the middle of it, it feels permanent. It feels like the weight will never lift, like the struggle will never end. But the truth is, pain has a time limit. It always does. No matter how unbearable it seems in the moment, it passes. What doesn't pass so easily, what lingers long after the discomfort fades, is the greatness built through enduring it. Pain is temporary, greatness is permanent. Think about the nature of pain. A workout burns, but only for an hour. The next day you're sore, maybe for a few days more. But the strength you build from that workout, that endures. A heartbreak can feel like it will destroy you, like you'll never recover. But months or years later, you look back and realize it shaped your perspective, clarified what you value, and strengthened your resilience. Even something as devastating as failure in business, in academics, or in personal goals, while the sting is sharp and real, eventually fades. Yet the lessons you gain, the skills you sharpen, the resilience you develop, those stay with you. The irony is that in the moment, pain feels louder than greatness. It demands your attention. It screams at you, quit now. Stop here. Don't go further. But greatness whispers. It doesn't shout. It waits quietly on the other side of sacrifice. And most people never reach it because they can't silence the noise of temporary pain long enough to hear the quiet voice of lasting greatness. This is where perspective becomes everything. If you can remind yourself in the middle of discomfort that this is temporary, you gain power over it. That's what separates champions from everyone else. Champions know that the body wants to quit long before the limit is reached. Champions know that the mind will exaggerate pain, making it seem unbearable, when in reality it's just a test of endurance. Champions anchor themselves not in how they feel in the moment, but in what they want in the future. Philosophically, this is about delayed gratification. The ability to endure short-term suffering for the sake of long-term meaning. Psychologists have studied this for decades, and the evidence is overwhelming. People who can sacrifice comfort now for a greater reward later almost always live more successful, more fulfilling lives. They're not slaves to the moment. They can envision the bigger picture, and that vision gives them the strength to outlast temporary discomfort. Think about students who spend years studying while their friends are out having fun. The pain of long nights, the stress of exams, the sacrifice of leisure, it feels heavy at the time. But the career, the knowledge, the opportunities that result from that discipline last for decades. Think about athletes training at dawn, pushing their bodies beyond exhaustion. The sweat, the fatigue, the pain of sacrifice, all temporary. But the medal, the record, the legacy, those remain long after the pain is forgotten. Even in personal growth, the principle is the same. Having a hard conversation, confronting your weaknesses, or letting go of toxic relationships. These are painful decisions, they hurt in the moment. But what they produce in terms of freedom, clarity, and strength outlasts the temporary sting. Here's something important: when you give up because of temporary pain, you trade something eternal for something fleeting. You trade permanent greatness for momentary relief. And most people don't realize they're making that trade until it's too late. They quit too soon, and what they could have become dies quietly inside them. That's the tragedy of surrendering to pain. It doesn't just rob you of the moment, it robs you of your legacy. So the challenge is simple, but not easy. You have to remind yourself constantly this won't last. The exhaustion, the rejection, the struggle, it's all temporary. But what I build by enduring it, what I become because of it, that will stay with me. Pain has an expiration date. Greatness doesn't. And when you internalize that truth, something shifts inside you. Pain loses its grip. It stops being the reason you quit and starts being the reason you keep going. Because you know on the other side of that suffering is something that will outlive the moment, something that will define you for years, maybe even generations. So don't let temporary pain make you forfeit permanent greatness. Hold on, endure, push through. Because the discomfort you feel now will fade, but the strength, the wisdom, and the greatness you earn will remain. Temporary pain is the price. Permanent greatness is the reward. Pay the price and collect what's yours. One of the greatest misconceptions about success is that it's all about the prize at the end. The trophy, the title, the recognition. We live in a culture that celebrates outcomes but ignores the process that produces them. We glorify the finished product while overlooking the grind, the discipline, the long nights, and the quiet sacrifices that made it possible. But the truth is this: if you only focus on the prize, you'll never last long enough to reach it. What sustains you is not the outcome. It's learning to embrace the process. The process is everything that happens when nobody's watching. It's waking up early to put in the work when there's no applause. It's practicing the fundamentals when no one is there to cheer you on. It's failing, adjusting, and trying again over and over without the guarantee that anyone will notice. And this is where most people quit, because they haven't learned to value the process itself. They see it only as a burden and necessary evil to reach the end goal. But if you can shift your mindset and learn to love the process, you gain access to an unstoppable kind of power. Psychologically, this is crucial. If your motivation is tied only to the prize, you'll constantly be at the mercy of circumstances. If progress is slow, if recognition doesn't come, if setbacks knock you down, you'll feel defeated. But if your motivation is tied to the process, the daily work, the discipline, the mastery, you'll keep going regardless of external results, because the process itself becomes meaningful. You start to take pride in the practice, not just the payoff. Philosophically, this ties into a much deeper truth about human existence. Meaning is rarely found in a single moment of victory. It's found in the struggle, in the journey, in the pursuit of something difficult. The philosopher Nietzsche wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." The process is yours. It's the structure that gives shape to your pursuit. And if your why is strong enough, no matter how painful becomes bearable, even worthwhile. Think about musicians who spend thousands of hours practicing scales. The concert might last an hour, but the mastery was built in obscurity, through endless repetition. Or athletes who train year after year for a single chance at competition. The medal might be worn for a lifetime, but the greatness was forged in the lonely mornings, the sweat, the drills, the failures along the way. The process is where character is formed. The prize only reveals it. And here's something people rarely talk about. The prize is fleeting, the applause fades. The trophy gathers dust. Even the thrill of success diminishes with time. But the process, the habits you built, the discipline you forged, the lessons you've internalized, those remain. They shape who you are, not just what you achieve. That's why embracing the process is not just about success. It's about becoming the kind of person who can handle success when it comes. The danger of chasing only the prize is that you may get it and realize it doesn't satisfy you. How many people win the championship, land the dream job, or achieve the milestone they long for, only to feel empty afterward? That emptiness comes from neglecting the process. If you hated every step of the journey, the destination won't magically make you happy. But if you found meaning in the grind itself, then every day was already a victory, regardless of the outcome. This is why the process has to become your focus. It humbles you, disciplines you, and keeps you grounded. It forces you to pay attention to the small steps, the details, the unglamorous work that builds real greatness. When you learn to embrace it, you stop asking, how long until I get there? And start saying, how much can I grow today? That shift is where true transformation begins. So here's the challenge: stop waiting for the prize to validate you. Start valuing the process that shapes you. Every early morning, every hard practice, every setback, every painful lesson. That's not wasted time. That's the making of you. That's where greatness is being carved moment by moment, day by day. Don't despise the process. Don't run from it. Learn to embrace it, because it's in the process that you become the person worthy of the prize. The prize is temporary. The process is eternal. If you can learn to love the process, the prize will come as a natural consequence. And even if it doesn't, you'll already have won, because you'll have become someone stronger, wiser, and greater than you were before. At the end of it all, what we discover is that pain is not our enemy. It's our greatest teacher. Every struggle, every setback, every disappointment carries within it the seed of transformation if we're willing to endure it and learn from it. The prize is never just the title, the money, or the recognition. It's the person you become in the process of pursuing something difficult and worthwhile. Greatness is not found in avoiding pain, but in using it. Allowing it to refine your character, sharpen your focus, and deepen your strength. So don't run from the weight of your challenges. Lean into them. Embrace the grind, the discipline, the long nights, the doubt, the failures. Because hidden within that process is the version of yourself you were created to be. And if you can commit to that journey, to showing up every day with courage and resilience, you won't just achieve success, you'll embody greatness.